President of the United States. First, why? I have been close to the presidency over many years. As most of you will know, I've served the President in 2 cabinet positions. I've been involved in presidential campaigns dating back to Ronald Reagan. I know the weight of that office. I have been present when remarkably difficult decisions had to be made. And I know it requires a person of sober judgment, of temperance, of experience. I have observed John Kasich and know him to be such a man. I worked with him when he was the chairman of the Budget Committee, and this country balanced its budget the last time. I have observed him as the governor of one of the great states in this country. He is a man of great experience, and he has Jackie and my full support and enthusiasm, as I know he does yours. I'd next like to just tell you a bit about presidential politics that I have learned over many years in many presidential campaigns. The first is that I believe that no candidate in this race will achieve 1,237 delegates prior to the convention. It will be a unique convention, but it will not be the first time this has occurred. You may not know that it has occurred 10 times in the Republican Party and 16 times in the Democratic Party. What you may not know is that in the 16 times it happened in the Democratic Party, that the person who occupied the lead position going into the convention out of the 16 won 7 times. Meaning that 9 times the person who may not have been the leading candidate going into the convention won. In the Republican Party, it has happened 10 times, and of those 10, the person who occupies Donald Trump's present position won only 3. There is a reason that John Kasich plays such a vital role, and it is that this party needs to elect a president. This party needs a candidate who can, in fact, and will, in fact, beat Hillary Clinton and become the next president of the United States. Please welcome with me the next president of the United States, John Kasich.
Thank you. We're late. So let's get started here, okay? Listen, I want to tell you that Governor Leavitt, this guy is really something. For those students who are here, if you don't go track him down and spend time talking to him, you don't know how to prepare for the next phase of your life, because this guy is really something. He's a brilliant man. He served his country in an incredible way, and, of course, the governor of Utah, right? He is absolutely the best, and he's a visionary. He's absolutely a visionary, and I just can't thank him enough for his support. But how about a great round of applause for my friend, Mike Leavitt, okay? And the reason why we are late is it took us, I think, 5 hours to get here. We faced all this wind, and we had to divert, and we went to Tulsa instead of where we were going in Colorado. And then we, on the way over here on the airplane, I want you to know, I got a chance to watch The Martian. It was a really cool movie, okay? And, yeah, it was really cool. We get to watch some of those movies, and so I watched 2 very interesting movies lately. One is Everest, where nobody thought they could climb to the top, and it's just one step after another. And I don't know, but in the movie The Martian, they caught that guy in space, just like the voters in the Republican Party are going to catch me and allow me to be the nominee and be elected President of the United States. But I want to tell you, coming here, as we were watching the movie, one of the people sitting next to me said, "Open the window." And I opened the window shade, and it was unbelievable when I saw the Lord's creation, which never ceases to take my breath away and never ceases to amaze me as I looked at all those high peaks with the snow-covered mountains. And then, in some respects, it reminded me of this battle for the nomination of the party. When I looked, I could see the really high, tall peaks that stood out and shone like a beacon. And do you know what's behind those peaks? Way down in the valley. I like to live on the peaks. I don't like to live in the valley of American politics. I want you all to understand that. And I think you all know by now that what I like to say, except for the fact that at times I have to point things out that people need to hear, and that's not that doesn't take away from the philosophy of never taking the low road to the highest office in the land. I'm going to continue to run a positive campaign with ideas. That's what motivates our governor here. So let me tell you a couple things. And again, I want to apologize for being late. I don't like to be late and keep any of you waiting. But let me say a couple things up front. Then we'll spend a little bit of time on politics, and then we'll go to you. And what I have found in our country as I've traveled, that maybe to some degree, people have lost confidence in their ability to change the world. For some reason, I don't know if it's because of the growth of big government, that many people have sensed that, well, what can I do? I'm just one little person here, and everything else is so big. I know that the people of this state believe in the fact that I think you all believe that the Lord has made every single person special. No one has ever been made like you. No one will ever be like you again. That's what my wife says. That's really great, John. But the fact is, we have certain gifts. And those gifts are supposed to be used. And for the young people that are here, because I know many of you will go on these missions, the fact of the matter is, by finding your gifts and going out and healing the world as part of a community that knows that we can make a difference, that's how you find satisfaction in life. And that's how you change the world. And just popping into my head right now is, are people in Utah changing the world? Well, I went to Welfare Square. They're trying to change the world one person at a time. You don't have to change them 1 million at a time. You change them one person at a time. And I want you to know that as I've traveled the country, I've talked about the bishop's, warehouse, storehouse. I've talked about Welfare Square. I've talked about individuals trying to help other individuals get on their feet, with the great tradition that it is a sin not to help somebody who needs help, but it's equally a sin to continue to help somebody who needs to learn how to help themselves. And I think you bring the best of that philosophy. So I happen to believe that the spirit of our country doesn't rest in the Mike Levitts or the John Kasichs or, we get hired, we should go do our job. The President of the United States, he or she should do their job. That's what you hire us for. The members of the United States Senate, the members of the House. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, they haven't been doing their job. And the country has drifted. And in many parts of this country, people are frustrated. And they're frustrated, number one, because they're not certain about the security of their jobs. Number two, their wages haven't gone up, it seems like, for 100 years. And number three, it used to be if you put your money in a bank, you actually get paid by the bank for using your money, called interest. And then they were always concerned about, and increasingly concerned about, the kids. Are we going, the great American legacy? Our kids do better than what we got from our parents. Each generation does a little bit better. And they're very concerned about this. And some of them are very angry. Part of this comes from politicians that made promises that were just silly. Mike, they ran in 2014 and they said they were going to repeal Obamacare. Now, I don't know whether you remember this or not, but the president's name is Obama. And that's his signature legislation. You see, and there was no way they were going to be able to repeal that with him sitting in the White House, and yet they promised they would do it. And when it didn't happen, they got angrier and angrier. You know what part of the problem is when politicians promise things they can't deliver. It grows cynicism in our country. And my philosophy is, be careful that the promises you make can be kept. Maybe once in a while you'll fall short. But you have to be square with the people. Don't be trying to get them all fired up and excited by promising something that's not likely to happen. Now, can we repeal Obamacare with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and the President? And can we restore it or exchange it with a system that's going to drive complete transparency on a market-driven principles? Yeah, we can. We can do that, but we cannot do that with him in the White House. So what is the answer to these concerns that people have about their families, their kids' future, and about their wages, and the purpose of what politicians can do to create an environment for jobs? I tell you, it's actually pretty simple. Now, just a little bit about me. I come from a blue-collar Democrat town, where if the wind blew the wrong way, people found themselves out of work. My father carried mail on his back for 29 years. His father was a coal miner. He died of black lung while he was losing his eyesight. My mother's mother could barely speak English, and my mother was the only one of the four to ever graduated from high school. We're told that they didn't really get any farther than the 8th grade. And I came to realize that fulfilling the purpose that the Lord has given us many times is reflected in work, in what we do in our jobs. Because we were meant to work. We were created to work. And frankly, to work in such a way that we can bring a healing in whatever way we can. So, work is so critical. And I've always felt that the single greatest moral purpose I have is to create an environment where job creators can excel, where job creators are confident that they can take actions that will increase the number of jobs, or people who have this desire to even create businesses can have an opportunity to do that. And it basically takes like 3 or 4 things. It's not that complicated. Number one is you can't have regulations that kill small business. I guarantee you there are people in this room who are going to start businesses. I know it. Entrepreneurship is alive and well in this state. I don't know if they teach it in high school or teach it in college, or somehow you all get it. That you don't have to work for somebody else, that you can create your own business and have somebody work for you. And that's a good thing. And if you have a business and they overregulate it, they will kill small businesses, which is the most important engine of job creation in our country. So you cannot overregulate. And you have to have it doesn't mean you don't have any regulations. Of course you do. But they have to represent common sense and a reasonable approach, understanding that the job creator can be put out of business and the people in our family will lose their jobs or not gain a job. Number 2, you have to always have lower taxes. The reason why you want to have lower taxes is because it drives the country from the bottom up. When we have more power in our pockets, there's more we can do rather than taking our money and send it to somebody out in Washington, D.C. It's OPM. It's other people's money. They'll squander it. So by cutting taxes for both business and for individuals, we spur economic growth. And finally, or thirdly, I would say, we need to have a fiscal a path to, to fiscal responsibility and a balanced budget. And we're now almost 19 trillion. Well, we are 19 trillion in the hole, on our way to 20. We now spend about $225 billion a year paying interest on the debt. Now, I'm not promising you this, but what I would say is if we took $100 billion and helped to ease your student loans, you'd kind of like that instead of spending money to pay for politicians that can't control their spending. Am I right? I mean, that's now, the other thing that we need is we need workforce. We need to make sure in our K through 12 and our higher education that we are training young people for the jobs that exist today and retraining people who are currently working for the jobs that may be coming. Those things will work. And let me explain to you why. When I was in Washington, I spent 10 years of my life to get us to a balanced budget. And it was very hard to do. And the reason it was hard to do is because you step on every toe. That's why the establishment is so much in love with me, because I really didn't care what they said. I said, we've got to fix this. And they're there to kind of protect things as they are. And I said, no, it won't work that way. When we got the plan on the table to balance the budget and cut the capital gains tax and gave a family tax credit, we started to explode, and we got to a balanced budget for the first time since man walked on the moon. We paid down $500 billion of the publicly held debt, and we had balanced budgets for 4 straight years. And you mark my words, Hillary Clinton will campaign this fall on the Clinton economy. Am I right, Mike? She's going to go around and say her husband did it. I'm going to tell you who did it. It was the troublemakers led by Newt Gingrich, me as Budget Committee Chairman, the Republicans in the House and the Senate who hadn't been in charge in 40 years, who created a dynamic for economic growth and forced Clinton to sign a balanced budget agreement, okay? So at that point, I kind of thought, I was on the Defense Committee for 18 years and did a lot of reforms there. I got the balanced budget thing done. We had a projected $5 trillion surplus, and I left the government. I didn't want to be in the government any longer. And I went back home, and my friend said, now that you and your buddies are leaving Congress, they're going to spend that surplus. I said, you can't possibly spend $5 trillion. You'd have to get up every day and think about how to do it. And you know who spent it all? You think the Democrats, don't you? The Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House. And let you in on a little secret. Democrats love to spend. Republicans love to spend too. They just feel guilty when they do it. Okay? That's why we need a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution to force all the politicians to do their job, okay? And we'll get that done. And then I was out for 10 years, and I was having the time of my life. I mean, I really don't like politics very much. It's just it's goofy, okay? It's a goofy business. But I got a call. Anybody ever got a call? I didn't get a phone call. I didn't get a text. I just got a call. Who in here has ever had a call, huh? Have you had a call? A lot of people here have had a call. And you just can't ignore it, you know? You remember when Jonah got a call, and he ran the other way, and all hell broke loose, okay? So I've always figured that when you get a call, you got to respond to it. And the call was to me. I felt it. Got to go back. Your state is dying. You have the tools. So let me tell you about Ohio. You don't know much about Ohio. You see, we have Ohio State, and we got great football and all that. And you think about Ohio, you think about cows and steel. Okay? Well, when I went in, we had lost 350,000 families were on hard times. We were we were 20% of our operating budget in the hole, $8 billion in the hole. And the credit agencies told me they were going to downgrade us. They were going to cut up our credit cards. And everybody thought that our best was really behind us. So using that formula of common sense regulations, lower taxes, and balancing a budget, let me tell you where we are today, because I just got our latest jobs report. In the five and a half years that I've been governor, we have gone from a loss of 350,000 jobs, and today we have grown private sector jobs by 417,000 families that are being helped. 417,000. We were $8 billion in the hole, and now we're $2 billion in the black. Our credit has improved. Our credit outlook has improved. Our pensions are secure. Our wages are growing faster than the national average. And we've really left no one behind. And by leaving nobody behind, I don't believe that the mentally ill ought to be sleeping under a bridge or living in our prisons. I think they have a right to rise. We have given, Mike, you won't believe this, but when we treat the drug addicted in our prisons and release them into the community, we have an 80% success rate that they will never come back. And we're trying to help the working poor so that a mom with a couple kids who gets a pay raise, she can't take it because she loses her child care. We're changing that to encourage the working poor to take a raise, to take a promotion, and be able to escape poverty so she can have a better life for herself and for her children. And we're doing that. So economic growth is not an end to itself. There's the last thing I want to tell you, then we're going to go to questions. I want to take this whole formula back to Washington. But one of the most important things that we have to do is to ship power, money, and influence out of that big bureaucracy back to where we live. I believe that the education programs should be returned to the states. The welfare programs should be returned to the states. The infrastructure programs returned to the states. Health care for the poor sent back to the states. And job training. I mean, you want to call somebody in Washington to figure out how you need to train people in Utah? That's about as absurd as it gets. And you know, it's interesting, because Mike Levitt had a lot of influence on me on this. And I said, Mike, what if we send it out there and things don't work the way they should? He said, well, let me tell you something, Governor. The people of Utah, the people of Ohio, have a better chance of getting their hands around the ears of their state representatives, state senators, and their governor than they have to be able to address their grievances at the federal level. And he's exactly right, and we will learn from one another, and that is the beginning of shifting power out of that town. And Mike, you're absolutely right, and we will not hesitate to get that done with a plan that will be presented to the Congress in the first 100 days, okay? Thank you. Thank you. God, I tell you what, you must have been having a lot of boring times out here. You're so charged up this morning. So thank you. Okay. So let me go to you. You know, I'm the only one who really wants to take lots of questions from the folks. And now's your chance to say whatever you want. Now, I've done a lot of town hall meetings, ma'am, and they've all been pretty good. So let's not blow this one, okay?
You can hold it. Okay. You've spoken several times about the Lord and religious things. Personally, how religious are you? I mean, do you attend weekly or...
Well, first of all, I try not to wear this stuff on my sleeve, but I do believe that there is a creator. But you know what? somebody asked me, well, why don't you talk about God more? You can get more votes. I said, well, using God to win a vote? I want to have a nice view of the golf course when I get up there, okay? And I'm not going to cheapen God. And all I can tell you is I think the most important thing about faith to me is you have a foundation. And, terrible things come. They're inevitable in life. Michael Novak, the great Catholic theologian, says, and I think he quoted from someone else, that life is but a vale of tears, and sometimes it can feel that way. Faith in a higher power doesn't solve that. All that faith in a higher power does is, I think, allow you to build your home on granite rather than on sand. But I'm not going to get into. If you want to know how I feel, I wrote a book called Every Other Monday, and it'll explain it to you. And I don't want to use it. Okay, I'm doing the best I can down here. And let me just also say, I will vote myself the most flawed man in here. The only good thing about the way it works is I get a mulligan every day. Okay, I get a mulligan. I get a mulligan every day to get up and do a little bit better. So, yes, ma'am, right there.
Sir, I would like to see the Republicans insulted. We were at war. And in order to conduct the war, you had to please the Democrats. And so that money was spent. We also had 9/11, and they had to defend us all across the country. That had a lot to do with the money that was spent by the Republicans. So that's one thing. Number two, I was a Rubio person because he stood with Iraq. He knew why we were there and what we accomplished and what we would have accomplished if we had stayed there. And I want to know where you stand there, because that tells me about your wisdom in handling public, the defenses. Jobs don't count for anything if we're not defended.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty good. I think that's been sticking her in her craw for quite a while, the way that sounded. Well, number one, the Republicans spent money like a drunken sailor on everything. Okay, they never had a veto there until like the 7th year of the Bush administration. Okay, I hate to tell you this, but it's true. And they're spending a lot of money now. They just broke their own targets again. You know why it happens? Because people want to go home and they want to be liked. Even in my state, when we started to run these surpluses, you couldn't believe the pressure on us to spend more money. And I have a Republican-controlled legislature. The reason why it happens is because people want to make people happy. They want to make everybody's got a special interest in this country. The key is who stands in the breach. Who says that if we do all this, we're not going to be able to grow. We're not going to be able to get our spending under control. We have a lot of Republican governors that are they're struggling to try to get their budget solidified because there's so much pressure to spend, and it's not like they're bad people or anything. It's just that you can lose your way, and it takes a leader to say, no, we're not going to do that, because if we cave on that, guess what happens? The economy gets hurt and people lose their jobs. Okay, number one. Number two. I served on the Defense Committee for 18 years. And when we had 9/11, Secretary Rumsfeld called me to the Pentagon to meeting with the former Secretaries of Defense to discuss our problems. And I was there. And by the way, when I was there was a man there, former Secretary of Defense or National Security Advisor. His name was Brzezinski. And his daughter's on Morning Joe. She's a very nice lady. And her father was in this meeting, and he looked over at Rumsfeld and he said, would you tell the president to stop saying dead or alive? That we want bin Laden dead or alive. Dead or alive just is incendiary. And Kissinger was sitting across the table from him. And he looked at Rumsfeld and he said, I agree. We don't want bin Laden alive. Okay. But anyway, so here's the situation. With Iraq, the first war in Iraq, was an amazing situation because the Muslim Arabs supported the West, and we went as a unified group to push Saddam out of Kuwait, okay? I actually went there after the war and even saw the oil fields that were still on fire. The Egyptian ambassador to the United States went to the Rose Garden and announced the support of our Arab friends who would work with us. Now let's talk about the second Iraq War. The second Iraq War was predicated on the fact that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, okay? He didn't have them, okay? There is no way that I would have ever gone back there a second time because it would have gotten us in the middle of a civil war. And here's what's interesting. George Bush the dad, you might recall, those who are young here will study it, but those who are older here remember that when we pushed Saddam out of Kuwait, our armies were advancing towards Baghdad. And people said, why didn't we go all the way to Baghdad and throw Saddam Hussein out? We didn't finish the job. But you see, we did finish the job. Because had we gone farther, we would have had ourselves in the middle of a civil war. Civil wars are not something that America should involve itself in directly. Okay? And let me give you an example. I was in Congress when Ronald Reagan supported the U.S. involvement in Lebanon. Now, I don't know how much you know about Lebanon, but you can't even figure out all the people that are fighting one another. There's so many of them. And we had a vote as to whether U.S. Marines should stay in Lebanon, and I voted no. Because I have learned over time, and I was a very young man at the time, talk about pressure. I was 30 years old, and Reagan was my hero. Well, you know what happened in Lebanon? They blew up our Marine barracks. They killed hundreds of Marines, and we left. You see, civil wars are a place where we should not involve ourselves. And you have to remember, when we say involve ourselves, we're talking about men and women who we stick in harm's way. So I believe that, for example, ISIS now, they need to be destroyed. And they need to be destroyed with the same coalition that we saw in the first Gulf War. The Arabs and the West fighting together both in the air and on the ground and destroy ISIS. And then, once it settles down, I'm for coming home. I don't want to rebuild any of those countries, okay? Now, so I think we have to be very, very careful. I'm going to tell you about Afghanistan. That can't go on forever. I mean, we're putting our resources and our flesh and blood over there for how long? I mean, at some point, they got to fight for themselves. And we've got to give them the equipment and the training to do it. And most particularly, they need some aircraft to support their ground forces. And if, in fact, we see Al-Qaeda or ISIS or anybody else gathering, we can use special forces to take them out. But a stay that lasts forever is not smart for us. We will wear our people out. That does not mean that we're not aggressive when our interests are at stake. And that's exactly how I feel about the need to destroy ISIS. Let me tell you the other thing I believe we need. We need shared intelligence around the world. They just caught one of the main fugitives today, thank God, over in Belgium. They finally caught him. You see, I think what's happening in the world, we can take lemons and turn it into lemonade. Let me tell you why I say it. The Egyptians know they have a problem. The Saudis know they have a severe problem. The Jordanians know that the radicals want to take them down. The Gulf states, they know what's at stake for all of them. They've become so, they've really tilted towards the West. The Cleveland Clinic has a hospital in Abu Dhabi over in the Gulf states, okay? And so the fact is, they know about the dangers. I don't think we need to tell the Europeans much about the dangers, do we? The French, the Brits, the Germans, the Belgians. We don't have to. We now have an opportunity to bring the civilized world together, to take care of business, to gather intelligence, to share intelligence, and communicate a message to the world civilization, respect for women, the rule of law, the ability to express oneself against the government, that these are values that transcend any of these radicals out here who are intent on trying to destroy our way of life. But I want you to know, it's easy. It's easy to rattle the saber. It's easy to threaten. But we have to be very precise and very careful, and we have to measure our direct interests. Before we commit people, that doesn't mean we can't support people with similar aims or similar goals that we have, but not with our men and women unless we are directly threatened. So that's kind of where I am on this whole thing, and I will predict this to you. When these wars wind down and we destroy ISIS, they're going to redraw the entire big chunk of the map of the Middle East, and they're trying to do it right now in Syria with the Kurds finally claiming some territory. The world, in some respects, is a mess because America retreated, because the president did not understand or did not accept our role as the leader of the free world. Didn't do it, went south, and we've got a lot to pay for. It's going to be more difficult to get us back up on our feet as a result. Right back here. So you're with the tie. Since you came with the tie, you get to ask a question. Yeah, we're going to get him a microphone. We're short on microphones in Utah. Go ahead.
Thank you for coming to Utah, Governor. I appreciate it. I've been trying to think of an eloquent way to ask this, but I can't, so I'm just going to ask it.
Yeah.
In 2010, I was released from federal prison. I had spent a lot of time addicted to drugs and so on. That, just that sort of thing that leads to those kind of consequences. I'm a law student at BYU now, and I really appreciate the things that you say. I really appreciate some of the things that you have said in regard to criminal justice reform and treatment and so on, giving people a second or third chances. I noticed one of your opponents has kind of backpedaled on some of his language in that area. And I was wondering if you could maybe, I've read a little bit about Ohio and how you've handled things there, and I'm wondering if you could tell me about your philosophy, and then also, please don't backpedal like your opponent has.
Let me just ask you before you sit down. If you're comfortable, share with them how you ever gotten that fix.
So it's...
And
okay.
Think of the courage it takes, huh? Huh?
So one of the things that I didn't realize till I was probably I'm 35 now. Till I was about mid-20s, I didn't realize how divorce affects children. Yeah, when I was young, my parents were divorced. My mom got remarried, but by the time she got remarried and I had a father figure in my life, being a good example, I was already a pretty angry kid. And it led me to kind of have some not so good friends and, down the path of drugs and, crime and all that sort of thing. And I had a lot of people trying to help me, but I wasn't ready. And I was in and out of jail and just had a lot of problems. I ended up getting involved with some friends in Salt Lake who had a meth lab and, kind of got, anyway, long story short.
How did you pull out?
So after I went to prison, I started to grow up a little bit. I went when I was 23. A couple years into it, I started to realize this isn't really the life that I want for myself. There was a lot of people there who had been sent for a long time. Had a bunch of kids they didn't know, and anyway, it wasn't the life that I wanted, and I tried to think, well, how can I pull myself out of this? And I wanted to go to school when I got out. I was able to come here. I graduated from this school in 2014. And the opportunities that I had when I was released are uncommon. The ability that I had with the family support, the relationship that I had prepared with my family had given me the support that I needed. And they said, if you want to go to school, if you want to do something good with yourself, we will help you. And so after I started coming here and doing well, more support came. And, I've had so many professors and people in my life willing to go to bat for me and give me a chance after I was given the opportunity to prove that I would work hard for it. And, even I don't
It's
know.
an amazing story, huh? I mean, this guy's smart. He's articulate. Well, let me tell you what we're doing. So, people just love a comeback story. I mean, that's America. I mean, we just love when somebody can pull themselves up. Look, I believe that every life is precious. And when I was a kid, I always wondered, could you have rehabilitation? I mean, we used to, remember in school, Mike, we used to debate, well, do we really think somebody can change? So I was fortunate enough to start on criminal justice reform right when I was elected. And because I'm a believer that you can't lock enough people up to get your way out of the problem. And beyond that, every human being should have a chance. Now, if you are a gangbanger, or if you're in prison and you're beating up your inmates, we're going to lock you up for 1,000 years. I mean, we're just not going to play around with it. But if you're in prison, we will give you an opportunity to learn a skill and to work your way out, and we actually train people in the prisons for jobs that exist on the outside. Secondly, we don't want to lock up nonviolent felons. I mean, people get caught in drugs, okay? Now, folks, I don't want you to be afraid, because we're not going to take somebody that will be a threat to society, to your children. We can put them in a local facility where we can get them to rise, because if you check the statistics, I'll bet in this state, and I know in our state, a big chunk of people that we put in prison are in prison for less than a year. And we put them in there next to murderers and rapists, and then we think, okay, well, this is good. So we want to make sure that we put people in a facility where they'll be secure, where the community will be safe, but we give them a chance to get on their feet. Okay, now let me go on. So I was in Cleveland, okay, with the mayor of Cleveland, and he's telling me that if you have been a felon, you can't get a simple job. You can't get a job cutting hair because you've got this felony on your record. And it's called collateral sanctions. So you try to come out, you try to get your life straightened out, and there's a million roadblocks. So it used to be in the state that if you came to apply for a job in the state of Ohio, there's a box. Here's your name. You know what I'm talking about. Here's your name. Here's your address. Have you ever been a felon? If you check that, we say, hey, great, thanks for coming in. And when we take your application and we throw it in the trash can when you leave. So we've eliminated the box. Now, let me tell you what that means. I want you to listen, because this is about redemption. And if I don't get elected, I will be upset. I'll cry for 15 minutes, but I'm not here to I'm here to try to help, okay? So if you come in, we don't ask you in your first interview. We will find out that you were a felon. And then we're going to give you a chance to explain yourself. So you, young man, you would be in a position of being able to explain your life and where your screw-ups were, and we would have the choice whether we want to hire you or not. But I find that there's a lot of employers out there that are willing to give people a second chance, and I want to give them a second chance. One other thing I also believe, and that is for those who are poor, there is a disproportionate number of people who don't have chances and opportunities and make big mistakes. And I don't believe that America can have a peaceful, hopeful, optimistic society if everybody, including those who grow up in poverty, whether they are in the minority community or whether they're in the majority community, people have to have hope that their lives can get better. People lose hope, they got nothing. Right? That's how you end up in drugs. That's how you end up in gangs. That's how you end up doing, that's where suicide comes from. And for those young people that are here today, life's confusing. It can be tough. In fact, for those that are here that are young, you can get to the point in life where you say, oh, now it's time for me to prove all that big talk that I've been talking about all my lifetime. And you can get confused. When you get confused, tell somebody. Don't keep it to yourself. Tell somebody. And for those moms and dads that struggle with depression, tell somebody. We will fix it. It will come. The help will come. But back to this young man. Of course, we want to give people a chance, and our recidivism rate in Ohio out of our prisons is, I think it's 27%. The national average is 50%. But because we give people a chance, we seem to be making progress. Thank you. I want to get a mom here. Let me see if I can, right here. I want to get a, go ahead, you can go. What happened to you? Skiing?
No, I wish. I can't actually ski right now.
Don't say that. That's not funny. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm a 15-year-old, and obviously, like, I'm gonna be going to college soon. In 3 years, I want to get a good education, and there are so many people. I mean, like, I have a great family, and I have ways to get to college. But there are so many people who don't, like, they can't pay for it, they can't find ways. So what are you going to do about student loans and things like that?
It's a pretty good question for a 15-year-old, huh, Mike? I mean, smart. Well, look, it depends on your financials. First of all, if you're in high school, you ought to be taking college credit courses, and they should be giving you credit at the university. I would assume that happens in this state. Number two, we have a number of students who will graduate with, decent honors, and we find out that they can't do math and English, so they have to go and take 11th grade courses when they're in college. And we need to solve that problem. And in other words, we can go online to remediate people. And by the way, we are joining Western Governors, just so you know. The other thing I would tell you is I was in Michigan at a really great school, but it was a community college. You could go there for 2 years, and you know what it would cost you for 2 years? You would $6,000 with all the credits transferring. So in other words, you could go to college for 2 years, pass all your credits on to the 4-year school, and it would cost you $6,000. So that means you've cut the cost of college education in half. And we're going to go to 3 years where you can go to a community college and transfer to, like, Ohio State. And they have to take your credits, and then what happens is you cut the cost of higher education by 3/4. So, everybody has to figure out what they can afford. It's like when you go shopping, right? You look at prices and you try to figure out what you can afford. You have an allowance? You have an allowance? Okay, you don't want to blow all your allowance on one thing, right? So you shop. And that's the way we should be dealing with higher education. And in addition to that, the leaders of higher education have to be very careful that they're controlling their costs. For those who would really get this, their overhead costs have grown astronomically over the period of the last 10 to 15 years because presidents of universities, sometimes like congressmen, you know what they want to be? If you're a president of a university today, what do you think you want to be tomorrow?
Another president?
How about president of the same school, okay? And if you cause a lot of trouble, it's a big, big problem. So we need better leadership out of our higher education people. And then we also have to think about what we can do for those that have rung up this high debt. We got to figure a plan out. We got to deal with this. This is a big issue, Mike, and we got to think about this. Okay, I keep going to him because he's smart. He'll help me figure this out. But we have to deal with this high debt problem that's currently out there, whether it involves community service. We just have to see. Okay, so pick where you can afford, so you don't go in too much into debt. Yes, guy back. Oh, wait, I got to come back. Yes, right there. You, right there.
Governor, thank you so much for coming to Utah. I actually have lived in Ohio for almost 20 years, and I just graduated BYU Law School.
Where did you live?
So, Cincinnati. I was working for Procter & Gamble.
Well, there you go. Good.
So, one of the questions that I have is, it's going to be a tough question. I sort of lob grenades sometimes.
That's okay. That doesn't mean I have to answer it. Go ahead.
Fair enough. I was super, super excited to hear that he who shall not be named, because I will not give him that type of credit, was not coming here for the debates. And I was looking forward to hearing more from you, because I know that awareness is one of the things that your campaign lacks, especially a lot of people here in Utah don't know who you are and what you're about. And I know if they did, that a lot of them would support you because your values align with the citizens of Utah. So I was a little disappointed to hear that you had then subsequently backed out of the debates, because I thought to myself, here's the first time that the blabbermouth won't be on stage to take over everything for so long, and Governor Kasich will actually be able to speak to the country and to the state of Utah. So could you help explain?
Yeah,
maybe?
because if we don't have the number one guy there, there's no point to having a debate if the guy who's leading isn't there, okay? And I can use my time more effectively to do things like this. And you're right about something. Yesterday in the New York Times, they published the amount of earned media, the amount of attention that all the candidates received. Trump was at about, I think he was at $1.8 billion worth of free media. And I was like, I don't know, was I 10th, Chris? I might have been 10. You know why? Because I don't name call. And one of the big, so for the first time since I've been in the campaign, as a result, by the way, of winning in like the most pivotal state in the country, Ohio, okay? We're now getting attention. But you're right from the standpoint that we're behind the curve in people knowing me. So we're just continuing to work. You know what? With very little money and very little attention, I'm one of 3 and one of potentially 5 people who could be president of the United States. We're doing something right by taking the high road. So the guy in the leather jacket.
Thank you for your work with the revolution back and the balanced budget back, and we appreciate your service. What I'd like to know, right now we understand even if you got 100+% of the delegates, you still wouldn't make it. And why can you feel good about you and Governor Leavitt and playing these games with this National Republican Party, which can cause disunity? Why can't we get behind a great candidate right now? We have Ted Cruz, one of the greatest constitutional and strong candidates we've ever had. Can you really feel good? I mean, what all you're doing, is it for your own interest? It's going to divide the party, and there's no way you can make it under delegates.
Yeah.
We all know that. So
okay.
How can you? It's
okay.
Let me answer. A lot of people know it's dividing. It will divide the party. It could be a problem.
First of all, the reason why I am running for president of the United States, and the reason why I continue to run, is I'm the only candidate that can beat Hillary Clinton in the fall. The other people can't. Number one. Okay? It's a fact. It's a fact. I hate to tell you, but it's a fact. Number two, can I, you had your say, sir. Let me just finish. Because I'm the only one that can beat her. Okay? The other people can't win. So, number two, the issue is, we're not playing a parlor game. I'm running for president because I have a record, experience, and vision that's different than the rest of them. And I'm not here to play a game. I'm here because I'm worried about who's going to run the United States. Thirdly, no one is going to go to that convention with enough delegates. And guess what? That's the process of picking the nominee. And by the way, today in one of the big national reports, they say that if we have a convention, they're going to pick the most experienced and the person who can beat Hillary Clinton in the fall. And guess who they said that was? Me. Okay? But thank you. Yes, is that for you?
Me? I know it's kind of unfair for the guy already holding the mic to ask a question, but after hearing that, I have to add something to that. Governor Kasich, I believe that you will be the next president of the United States. I believe that you are the only candidate who can beat Hillary Clinton that we have left. My question is, and I completely agree with what you said, that you have every right, just as much as Ted Cruz or Donald Trump or any other Republican for that matter, to run until the end as long as nobody else reaches 1237. It's ridiculous to say and childish to say that anybody should be denied that right when that is the way the process is set up, and those are the rules that we have agreed to. So,
all right.
My question is this.
I may name you a spokesman.
I like you, Governor Kasich. I like you.
Good.
I'd love to talk later. But my question is this. Once you have the nomination, you are going to have to run against one of the biggest political powerhouses in the history of the United States. How do you plan on contrasting against Hillary Clinton and effectively beating her without creating a negative tone? I watched Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz say they would never go negative, and they broke my heart. And that is why I'm here for you. Can you promise that you will never go back on your word to run a positive campaign?
Well,
how will you beat Hillary Clinton without doing that?
First of all, records are fair game. Okay, that's fair. But going underneath and using personal attacks, calling people liars or whatever that we've heard, or we have a riot if I can't get the delegates at the convention. Frankly, I don't think that's the way we ought to be conducting a campaign for president. We got a lot of young people here, and they want to believe that the American political system can be good and positive and all that. So with Hillary Clinton, the problem that let me kind of give you my sense of things. People vote for somebody that they get a sense can be a leader. People don't spend a lot of time analyzing this tax plan versus that tax plan. They try to get a sense of, can I vote for somebody who I think can represent me and run this country? Experience matters. Vision matters. And the problem that Hillary has is she's a person that relies on focus groups, polls, and will tell anybody what they want to hear in order to get a vote. People are smart in this country. People will make a decision based on who can be the best leader. And the record that I have, both in Washington and in Ohio, not only of having conservative solutions, but being able to bring people together. Let me give you an example in my state, which is a microcosm of America. I won 86 out of 88 counties in my last election. I won 60% of the women vote, 51% of union households, and 26% of African Americans. And by the way, over in Ohio, where we just had a primary, I beat Donald Trump by 11 points, okay? And so what I'm saying to you is, I don't think you have to go negative. I think you need to talk about your vision. I think you need to talk about your record. And I think at the end of the day, people will want somebody who's actually fixed problems, who also has a vision for what they want to do. And that's the best that I can do. In terms of going head-to-head with her, when she says we're going to get free this and free that, come on, folks. We know we're going to have all this stuff free. I mean, what are you kidding me? She switched her position on I don't know how many things, and guess how many positions I switch? Once in a while I'll switch, but very rarely. Because, I know what I believe and I know what works. And there's only 3 things that will matter in this presidential election. 3 things. Jobs, number 1. Jobs, number 2. And guess what the third one is? Jobs. And what she'll try to do is claim that the Republican work that we did under her husband created the jobs. And it will have to be up to me to describe exactly what happened and why it happened, and talk about my record in Ohio. And let me tell you another thing. Her record on foreign policy is terrible. She's been part of this whole failed Obama administration foreign policy. So we'll discuss it, but calling names, I'm not going there. You know what? Too many people want you to do it the right way, and I believe at the end, because of bringing people together, having a positive vision, and unifying people, I will be the next president of the United States. Thank you all very much, and I got to go. I'm on now. Last thing, we have this caucus coming up, so could you go and help me? If you don't like me, then don't tell anybody. But if you did like me, get out and help me in these caucuses, please, and appreciate your support, and let's move forward.
It's a beautiful